The Gauteng Department of Education says it is pleased with the progress of online school admissions, and this is for grades 1 and 8 for the 2025 academic calendar. So those applications opened yesterday, and the department says so far they have received more than 200,000 online applications. Let's talk about it with Spokesperson Steve Mabona. Steve, good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us on the program. So it opened yesterday. We're already sharing some numbers. Any updates on the numbers at this point in the day, since you've opened?
No, thanks very much. We are quite excited about the system. You know, the numbers don't lie. We didn't have any glitches. We opened at 8 o'clock. Parents, actually, some of them were queuing, you know, waiting for us to open. And we started with the process. So by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we were at over 229,000 successful applications that have been processed. So today, probably, we might be looking at over 300,000. We'll update the stats, you know, later.
How old is the online registration system now, Steve?
How is it now?
How old is it?
Oh, we started in 2016.
Because I remember speaking to you in the inaugural launch, and I remember, I think the system had crashed. There were some issues in those early days. So we're a long way from that point where, you know, it's improved, it's gotten better, and as you say, it's at these levels of efficiency now.
Now, fortunately, I joined the following year, which is 2017. But
around that time,
it was moving. It was moving. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's talk then about just some of the requirements that parents need to have. And I know that the MEC, Matume Chilwane, was saying things like parents not making assumptions about their grade Rs being automatically registered for grade 1. Just talk to us about what parents need to be aware of then, what they should be doing now.
Documentation is quite key because you need that to be uploaded in the system. As a parent, we have, or guardian, we have 7 days to upload the documents. If you can't upload, you can still submit those documents to a school that you would have applied to. We need your identity. If you are going to apply for a child that is going to grade R, or to grade 1, rather, they need immunization, what we call clinic card.
Yeah.
You need proof of home address. That's quite key because when we start with the placement period, that's where we start. You need to be closer to home. If you're going to utilize work address, we will need that as well as a proof. And if you're going to grade 8, we need a grade 7 report card. Quite key because we need to check on the language of teaching and learning. We need to see what are the additional languages that we need to add. You know, so it's quite key that we have the grade 7, you know, report card so that we assist you. So those are the documents that you really need.
So talk to us also about, you know, people who are coming from other provinces and the issue of documentation, especially those who are immigrants in South Africa and their children. What are some of the issues you typically run up against, and what should the public be aware of and prepare if they fall into those categories?
There we need your passport. There are those that will have permits, whether work or study. We will require all those documentation. And coming from other provinces, you can still apply remotely. You just need to make sure that you click the current province that you are in and the school, you know, that you are in. We are then in a position to assist. But the documents must then be uploaded within 7 school days or after application.
These are quite high numbers we're talking about, you know, north of 230,000 applications, which represent children, which represent families and arrangements that have to be made. How does the provincial department use that data? I know you're going to make those allocations. Some parents are asked to provide their first, second and third choices. They may not always get the choice that they want. Sometimes they may not even get their, you know, even their third choice. I know there might have been cases like that where, you know, even those schools in the third band aren't necessarily available. How do you plan in terms of those allocations, and what should parents be prepared for as well in terms of what they want?
We just want to encourage parents, when they apply, they must avoid probably applying to high-pressure schools only, because some parents will just apply to high-pressure, you know, schools
What is a high-pressure school?
A high-pressure school is the school that everyone wants. You will receive probably over 1,500 applications where the school have just only a capacity of 300 or 400 spaces. So the majority will then be not accommodated. We need to seek space in the neighboring schools. So we just want to call upon them to apply. If we say 5 schools, make sure that some they are not high-pressure schools.
Talk to us about, again, going back to the planning question in terms of the allocations, because the demand is high. As you say, for some schools, the demand may be even greater. Parents can't be accommodated. In years gone by, we've gone weeks into the beginning of a school year where the placements haven't happened. Ultimately, they might happen before the end of that first term. How much better has the department got at making sure that those placements can happen quickly? What is the expectation for 25?
We will want to encourage parents to apply now during the application period, which will end on the 12th of August, meaning that we will be then in a position to start with the allocation. But the numbers will give us an idea where are we pressured, where we need to augment, where we need to increase capacity. There are schools that will allocate, funding to them to build, classrooms. There are schools that will give them mobiles because probably they can't build in that school. We are going to introduce new schools that we are building. So it's important for us to have the numbers. We know that there are those that will not apply, and most of them, there are those that will be coming in January to say, yes, I applied when we were opening the system for late registration, because that's what we'll normally do. Probably we'll do that in December, leave the system, and parents will then apply. But at that time, because we would have been done with the placement process, like majority of schools will then be full. Schools that will be available there, parents will say, yeah, they gave me a school that is very far from where I stay. I don't want this school. So we will then be in a position to assist them and try to probably, add numbers in other schools and make sure that...
At what point will parents be notified, Steve, of the allocation so that they can make those provisions to either object or have a conversation with the department?
We're starting on the 16th of September. SMSs will be sent out to parents, but parents are amenable to visit the site and go check because they have credentials. Use the same credentials that they use to apply, go back into the system and check, because sometimes you might not receive an SMS or you might have lost your phone, but if you access the system, you will see if we have allocated you space. So it's quite key that parents need to go back into the system and check. Yeah. They might find that they've been allocated.
And if they haven't seen something by the 16th of September, they've got to say, hey, we applied online, we haven't heard anything, so maybe, sort of raise their hands up so that something can be done urgently.
No, they need to go back into the system and check. We will be issuing, SMSs, but normally we will not be in a position to issue all of them, at a go.
Right.
So that's why some might not receive SMSs, but when they go into the system and check, they might find that they've been allocated space. Right. So it's quite key to go back into the system.
Because the idea is just rather over-communicate, be there, keep checking, monitor so that you at least know where you stand when it comes to the kids. Before I move on to this really terrible accident that we have been reporting on, the deaths of those children, I just want to quickly ask, what is the deficit, Steve, in terms of infrastructure for schools in the province right now? I mean, what is the backlog or the hill you have to climb in making sure that those facilities, brick and mortar facilities, are available? I know you talked about mobiles. Some schools might be building on extra classes, but how big is the need and this hill that you're climbing?
It's quite huge in the high pressure areas, which we have already identified. That's why we've started with the process of introducing what we call satellite schools. So it will be the entire school that is linked to an existing one, new site that is not far from the existing school. So
what
they will have their own principal, they have their own teachers, while we are planning for long process to build a brick and mortar, school.
What numbers are we talking about? I mean, if you say the need is great, I mean, how many more schools in terms of numbers do we need?
Look, we're going to be introducing, in this current term, we're going to be introducing about 25 schools, which will be done. But still, that in the high pressure areas, because the development is so huge, you need extra 2 or 3 schools in an area. And I can mention areas where we are pressured in the Pretoria West area, in the Roodepoort area, in the Centurion area, in Ekurhuleni. There's 4 areas, like in the area of Benoni, and when you move to Springs, we need additional, capacity. So we are, shortchanged by the mushrooming of development, which, well, we can't blame because the population is growing, but we are really lagging behind, but we are pushing.
Let's talk then about this really sad story. And Steve, again, the police are investigating, so some of the details aren't quite known. But what we do know is that apparently the vehicle that was transporting the children was overloaded. It's a 14-seater. It was carrying 20 children. And that apparently it wasn't registered. And it also seems to be a private vehicle that is doing scholar transport. Now, I know that Gauteng has a scholar transport policy, and it deals with a range of things, the modes of transport, whether it's a bus or a minibus, governed by operating licenses. It needs a permit. There needs to be certification. In other words, there's a whole lot of safeguards and controls around that. What happens in a case like this, where somebody is transporting children to school? Is it the school's responsibility to ensure that there are these guidelines enacted, that people are registered and licensed? Is it the families? Where's the missing link?
Sorry. Look, we all have a responsibility. These are our children. It might have been a private scholar, transport, but as a school, we need to make sure that all the transportation that is coming to our school, we check the roadworthiness, we check on how our children are being transported. So we all have a responsibility. In terms of the enforcement, Department of Transport has a role to play to make sure that transportation is roadworthy. They tick all the boxes. There's the scholar transport associations where many of those private scholar transport should belong. We understand that some of them don't belong there. So there's a lot of work that we need to do as government to make sure that the association have a record of everyone that is on our road who's transporting our children, and putting an emphasis on everyone adhering to regulations, and make sure that the traffic police, they also do their work.
But who does the buck stop with, though, Steve? On the one hand, I want to ask, when last did the Provincial Education Department meet with these scholar transport associations, have a meeting with transport, and talk about how everyone works together to accomplish what you say, the fact that it's everyone's responsibility? But in a case like this, where does the buck stop? I mean, is it the school's responsibility to check on who's bringing the children to school, or is it the parents? Whose responsibility is it?
Well, it starts with the parents. I mean, we need to check the transportation that we put our children in, because we are paying. It's a service that is rendered.
Right.
You can't just pay and say, okay, it's fine, it will go that way. I mean, to a certain extent, if we don't know how your child is transported, it becomes a challenge, because we know that some of them, they're someone who transporting the child from home. It's not the child, it's not the person that will end up delivering the child, at school. Yeah. So those things we need to look at. But as a school, we also have a responsibility. Department of Transport as well, we all have a responsibility. MEC for Transport acknowledged that we need to do a lot of work, make sure that we cooperatively work together. You know that as Department of Education, we manage the scholar transport that we fund, that we ferry, children. We meet with the stakeholders in trying to make sure that they comply with the service level agreement that we have signed. If we see that your transportation does not conform to the service level agreement, we then take it out of the road. Yeah. It must be replaced.
How does the public know which of those vehicles do fall under your scholar transport program? I mean, is there like signage? Is there certification that they get to put on their window, so everyone knows this is government approved? The due diligence has been done. Our kids will be safe.
The schools know and impart that knowledge to parents, because parents will know we use buses only. We don't use mini buses. Most of the private scholar transport is mini buses. Yeah. So we don't use mini buses. We use your 60-seaters and more. Yeah.
Do you think that we have to do this differently, Steve, the way that kids can be transported to school in general? I mean, we know that kids come from different communities, especially if, as the parents say, we're not getting our first or even second or third choice. It means a longer distance our kids have to travel. It's costly. Some kids might come to school on a taxi, different modes. Is there a way, I mean, how are you thinking differently about how we get children to school safely and economically for parents?
Look, we will intervene, and we have started actually. Like, for instance, introducing English, in most of the townships, because some of the parents, when you ask them, they prefer their children to be, opting for English as a home language. So you find that you don't have much offsite school in the townships. So we've started introducing those, but some parents, because are accustomed to children being transported, some, they doubt, when you start introducing the language. But when time goes on, then they understand, they will then take their children there. So our intervention is to introduce more of such schools in the townships, because that's where you see.
You're saying
a lot
English
of
is the only reason why parents are looking elsewhere? So there would be other issues, right? Like amenities, resources, teachers.
The parents and children now, they want their children to speak English. So that's why they wouldn't go to a former model school that is in a suburb, that is performing bad, but they will leave a school that is doing well in the township and bring their children there. I mean, our township schools have been improving, immensely. When you check on our matric results, we can show you, we can attest to that. They are doing well. I mean, we have schools that are in the township that we can give you 100%. We have schools in the suburbs, former model cities, that are giving you 70%, even 80%. So it tells you that there's a problem there.
Yeah.
But because people are accustomed to, okay, you transport, they are from the township, they're in town, they're doing well, only to find that sometimes they're not even doing well.
Steve, we'll leave it there, but I think this has opened up the possibility for a different conversation on the capacitation of schools in the townships, as you say, and the resourcing of those schools, and for parents perhaps to reframe their understanding of the education opportunities where they are. That might negate some of the other issues that come about if they are going to be educated elsewhere. Thanks for talking to us this morning. Appreciate your time. Steve